Bill, the car is making a grinding sound when I press the brakes.
Does it happen all the time, or is it intermittent?
Just sometimes, but it's super loud.
Well, it sounds like the pads are almost gone on the disc brakes. It's a quick replacement, and I've been wanting to replace the rotors anyway because they've been pulsating like they're warped.
Oh, joy.
We received no compensation for the mention of or appearance of products or companies in this video. Jacks are made to be used on solid surfaces, not dirt. So I use my portable jack floor that provides a solid surface for the floor jack. You can see the description below for a link to how it was made. Doing any repair on a vehicle, you need to follow some safety steps. Blocking the wheels, don't get under it if it's only held up by a jack, wear gloves to protect your hands, protective glasses, and so on. When taking a wheel off a car, it's best to loosen the lug nuts before the wheel is completely off the ground. Then it doesn't just spin. Then when all the lug nuts are loose, jack it up the rest of the way, and then remove the lug nuts. Then the wheel can be removed and put in a place where it won't be in the way. I like to put it under the car, so if the jack and the jack stand fail, the wheel will hold the car up off me some. Next, the brake pads need to be removed. This is done on most cars by removing the caliper. On the Saturn Vue, this is held on by two bolts that allow the caliper to float in the mounting. So as the pads wear out, the caliper is constantly adjusting to the new center of the pads. Because of this, rocking the caliper a little will free the pads from direct contact with the rotor, and the caliper will just slide off. You never want the caliper to hang by the hose that attaches it to the brake system. So I hang the caliper by a bungee cord from the spring. With the caliper out of the way, the pads just come off, followed by the anti-noise clips that keep the pads aligned and not rattling. Next, the caliper bracket needs to come off. This is held on by two very substantial bolts that have Loctite on them. A little effort on the wrench and they just come loose. A long ratchet handle helps on these to get them loose, but as you will see, it helps to have a gear wrench, box wrench. As the bolts back out, it gets tight in that space behind the bolt. Once the bracket is off, there's nothing else holding the rotor in place, and it just slides off the wheel lugs. I always double check the new part with the old one to make sure it's the right one. You can also see the hot spots on the old rotor that cause the rotor to warp and pulsate in moderate braking. Then I just put it back together in the reverse order of taking it apart. With the caliper bracket first and remembering to use Loctite on the bolts, this keeps the bolts from loosening from vibration. The gear wrench is ratcheted on the box end and is very thin for tight spots. On highly stressed bolts like this, I use a torque wrench to finish tightening them. This way I know that they are tightened properly. It clicks when it reaches the correct tightness. The last set of brake pads I used didn't work out well at all. In doing research on this, I found that the pads recommended for this car are ceramic. On the last ones, I had gone cheap with semi-metallic pads, and for some reason they caused uneven heat in the rotor and a lot of wear on the rotor as well. The ceramic pads are more expensive, but they seem to be working better. The pads come with new anti-noise clips that just snap into place, but I have to be careful because they're very easy to bend. With the clips on, the pads now fit tightly into them. They almost have to snap in place. The wear sensor equipped pad goes on the inside of the rotor. With the new pads in place, the caliper pistons need to be pressed back to make room for the new pads. On single piston calipers, I always use a big C-clamp and one of the old pads to press the piston back in. But since I couldn't center the clamp in this case, it didn't work out as well. So I got out my big slip joint pliers and used them to squeeze the pistons back in using the pad. Next, I just put it back on the caliper bracket and bolt it down. No Loctite is needed here because there's not as much vibration and stress on these bolts. Next, I use spray brake cleaner to remove grease and dirt from the new rotor that contaminated it during assembly. This helps in breaking in the new pads and rotors. This stuff dries clean, leaves no residue, and doesn't chemically harm the pads. This brake is done except for testing. So now it's time to put the wheel back on and get it off the jack stand and jack. I always use a torque wrench to final tighten wheel lug nuts down to make sure that the wheel is solid on the car. Then I move to the other side and replace the pads and rotor on that side. The driver's side had the pad that was making the grinding sound, and in looking at it, it was almost totally out of friction material. No wonder it was grinding.
Thanks for watching our video. If you like what you see, press the like button below and subscribe. And also check out our other videos.